Many people condemn nationalism in a struggle, especially those who call themselves socialism. When they do this from a narrow perspective of the culture of Europe. They must widen their perspectives. The first law of dialectics is that everything has inside of it both positive and negative characteristics. Therefore, at no time can something just be negative. Even if it's negative in one situation, it can be positive in another. Why, even capitalism, when compared to feudalism, is positive. Of course. Therefore, everything has a positive. Therefore, if nationalism is negative, under conditions in Europe, going from the nation to the state, it's not negative going from the state to the nation. It's a positive force. History bears us out here. From 1945, the battering ram against imperialism has always been national liberation movements. National liberation movements. Therefore, those who are seeking sovereignty must use their nationalism properly, must not be afraid of others, and need not apologize. Their nationalism has been trampled upon. Arriving at this nationalism, of course, will be their culture. We keep emphasizing this necessity of comprehending culture. If one doesn't properly comprehend it, one makes great errors. Let me give you an example. The other day, when speaking at a group of people, a young sister raised her hand and said, "Kwame Ture, you were involved in the movement in the 60s, isn't that true?" I said, "Yes, it is." She said, "Well, you did a very bad job on the question of women." I said, "How's that?" She said, "Our women played no part in the movement. They had no menu." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Oh, please, I'm sorry, you've just misunderstood life completely." She said, "You don't even understand your culture." Women are oppressed everywhere in the world. One of the reasons for their oppression is because they are so thoroughly disorganized. Organization is the weapon of the oppressed. Organization is the weapon of the oppressed. And if one would look at women, they're even more separated and disorganized than peasants. Therefore, African men are no different from many others. They oppress their women. But if one would look at the culture of Africa in relationship to the struggle, there is one statement that can be properly made here. African men oppress their women, but the one place they cannot oppress them is on the front lines fighting for them. Everywhere history will bear us out, especially in the 1960s. Of course, this young woman has done no study at all. Of course, no one can struggle without study. No one can struggle without study. No one can struggle without study in every area of one's life. I reminded her that Africa gave the first queens to the world centuries ago. I also pointed out to her that Africa gave matriarchy as a family organization throughout the entire continent. Of course, if Africa gave the first queens to the world, and these were queens equal, and gave matriarchy, certainly where the women is in the center of the family life, and if today our women are slaves, even if they're men, there must have been some discontinuity somewhere with our culture, our history, clearly. Therefore, while there can be discontinuity, we've demonstrated the consciousness cannot be discontinued, it rises. So African women themselves, knowing what their position should be, will fight even harder to get back to freedom for the entire people. If you look properly at this, you will see it. If you just take a quick look at the history of Africa, women are always out front. If you look to Angola, you'll find a woman named Nzinga, queen on the battle lines, fighting. If you look during the period of colonialism in Africa, you will find Asantewaa in Ghana, fighting against the British. If you know nothing about the history of the Africans in America, if you look at slavery, you will hear names like Harriet Tubman, you'll hear names like Beecher Stowe, you'll hear names like Ida B. Wells. If you look at the movement of the 1960s, if you take the slightest penetrating look, you will see that the woman who started the movement was a woman named Rosa Parks. She's the one who started it. If you will look properly at the movement, you will see the founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the organization for which I worked, was founded by a woman, Ella Baker. If you look properly at the civil rights movement, what they call civil rights, you will find women played roles everywhere up front. When I was a congressional district for a stick in Mississippi, trying to get 5 congressional people to run against the racist Mississippi, a job which meant that they could have their lives taken away from them, at least their houses will be burned, we could only get 4 women and 1 man, and the man was the weak-kneed one. If one would look everywhere, names like Angela Davis. And I even asked her, what about Assata Shakur? She said, who's she? Assata Shakur, who knows her? Only you. Oh, let me tell you just a little bit about her. All right, let's just a little bit about it. Just a little bit about it. Because, you know, they always say that women don't play roles, etc. But the capitalist press lies all the time. Assata Shakur was a member of the Black Panther Party. which I had the distinction of serving as honorary prime minister. When the Black Panther Party split, it split on two wings, the right wing and the left wing. The right wing went to the Democratic Party, electoral politics, and barbecuing pigs. They stopped shooting them, they started barbecuing them. The left wing went to the Black Liberation Army. The Black Liberation Army picked up arms against the state. The leader of the Black Liberation Army was a woman by the name of Assata Shakur. She was on a 10 most wanted list by the FBI for years in the 70s. There was no way they could get her. And she was living in New York, giving orders against them. Such and such a policeman carried out a racist act. We want him shot, and he'd be shot. These two racist policemen are riding around the police. They committed such and such a crime, put a hand grenade under their car, and it would be put. The FBI wanted her. She, in her book, and she has a book entitled Assata, A-S-S-A-T-A. If you want to read about the struggle, other than what the capitalist press gives you, about just another sister in the struggle, she has in her book, she made an error. She went down the New Jersey Turnpike between New York and New Jersey there, and the police obviously had followed them and had a shootout. In that shootout, her husband was killed. Another member of the Black Liberation Army was wounded, and she was shot in the back. I'll never forget that day. The FBI were happy. They came on television, they were just rejoicing like the choir in St. Patrick's Day. We've got her! We've destroyed the Black Liberation Army, we've got the soul, we've got the leader, and where we put her, no one will get her. Do you know the Black Liberation Army broke her out of jail in New Jersey and took her to Cuba, and that's where she is today, still head of the Black Liberation Army. That's why this question of culture becomes so crucial. And once you analyze your culture, you see it properly. Women must be organized, and they must organize themselves. They cannot depend upon their fathers, their brothers, their husbands, their lovers to free them. Only they themselves will free themselves. If one would look at all revolutionary parties and revolutionary organizations, one will see the solution here is to be found. All of them have organized women wings. In our party, the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, we have the All-African Women's Revolutionary Union. Every woman in our party is a member of this union. We will never have an All-African Men's Revolutionary Union because men oppress women. If you want to redress the problem, you disarm men and you give arms to the women. Give them organization, take away organization from men. Of course, Africans have nothing to worry about with this. Knowing the history of our women, they are fighters. Even when we oppress them, they fight for us. Why, if we free them, we can sit down and they'll take on the enemy by themselves. By themselves. That's why. I know you're ready. This is why culture is so important. So we have spent time in the area of culture and ideology. Again, showing this as our movement advances. This is necessary because for organization, and we said what we need is organization, to go from mobilization to organization, one needs only three things: people, principles, and people faithful to principles. For any organization, one needs only three things: people, principles, and people faithful to the principles. If you have a fraternity, you have men. You have principles, and their fidelity to these principles. Depending upon their faithfulness to the principles will give you the strength of the organization. For a church, Christianity, you have people, principles, the resurrection, the Holy Trinity, etc., etc. And you have people faithful to it. If at a church, people really uphold the principles of Christianity, it'll be a strong church. If they go there just to see how everybody's dressed, who's going with who, etc., etc., well, we know what kind of church it'll be. Therefore, this aspect of fidelity to principles is what is necessary for revolutionary forces. That's why the struggle, in the illogical arena, is a crucial struggle for people who speak of sovereignty and nationalism. In order to rule oneself, one must think for oneself. One must direct one's actions through one's thoughts, but these thoughts can only come from one's actions. Therefore, it is clear that the question of sovereignty must lead to revolution as it comes to question the values of the oppressor. And since the oppressor used systems to oppress you, one must use the diametrical opposite to free oneself. We said capitalism split Africa, socialism will unite Africa. This aspect of diametrical opposition must be properly understood. The other day, a man got up and said, "Kwame Ture, the one thing I don't like about you is that when you speak, you're so full of hatred." I told him, "Yes, I have a passionate hatred for injustice." He said, well, I don't hate anything. I laughed at him. He said, no, I'm a Christian, I don't hate anything. In Christian, we just love everything. I asked him, do you love Satan? Do you love sin? Why, if you're a Christian, you better hate Satan. And the more you love God, the more you've got to hate Satan. As a matter of fact, if you don't hate Satan thoroughly and completely, you hate him, but there's some things about him you like, you're finished. You're finished. You are finished. If you hate Satan, but you like the way he dresses, you're finished. When Satan sees this, says, look, I just had a tailor-made suit for you. Try it on. Yes. Therefore, when you say you come to fight for justice, you must have an intense hatred for injustice. When you say you come to fight against an enemy, you must have intense hatred for every negative aspect of the enemy. This hatred must be total. It must allow for no chance for it entering into your conception. The culture of the people becomes crucial in this struggle because they will come to hold dear to all their positive aspects, holding strongly to their principles, understanding that it's only through the real struggle, the struggle of ideas, the struggle for values, knocking down old values, building up new ones, and putting a society which comes to implement the values of these societies is the only road to freedom. Revolution is total, both in action and in thought. Revolution is total. We say the people will arrive at their freedom. The job of those of us who are conscious is to help make them conscious of their unconscious actions by building organizations which will direct these actions against the enemy as we construct a society and astonish the world. We will give them a more honest society than Hawaii had before the intervention of colonialism. Thank you. Ready for the revolution.